Good morning. Good morning. Let me add my welcome to 2019's DBI Earthquake Safety Fair. We're so happy you took the time out from your busy schedule to be with us today. Let me introduce my colleagues. I'm Gary Love from DBI. Brian Strong, who's the Chief Resilient Officer for the City of San Francisco. Gary Ho, Senior Engineering Officer for DBI, and Richard Town. They're going to cover some key important elements on a recent study done about the seismic safety of tall buildings in the city of San Francisco. Brian, please start us off.
Yeah. Hi. Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay in the back too? Feel free to move forward. There are seats up here, and I promise that we won't be asking any, really challenging questions or anything. So, but we wanted to, I really wanted to thank you all for taking time out of your day to come here to participate in the fair that we do. This is the third time that we've done this earthquake safety fair. And we really think it's a great opportunity to hear from different vendors in the city, to hear from residents, and to give you an opportunity to learn a little bit about what San Francisco is doing. So I am the Chief Resilience Officer for the City and County of San Francisco. A lot of you may say, what is that? And my job really is to try to pull together different aspects of the city to make us more resilient, primarily to big shocks like earthquakes, and potentially it could even be heat events or those types of things, but also some of the stressors, a lot of those we're seeing around climate change, that if we're not addressing some of those stressors, it could be floods, it could be different types of crises in the communities, it could be unemployment in different areas, then after an earthquake or after an event, we're that much worse off. So part of our office's responsibility is the Earthquake Safety Implementation Program. There was a community action plan for seismic safety. It was actually a committee of San Francisco residents like yourself, stakeholders from a lot of different communities. They put together a 30-year plan. That plan came out in 2011. It goes to 2041. And part of that plan is talking about building performance in San Francisco. Another part of it was the soft story retrofit program that we're actually 2 years, we're almost wrapped up with. This September will be Tier 3, and then the final tier will be due in the following September. That's going to provide much safer homes for about 114,000 residents. So, and that really addresses those soft story structures that we saw that were affected by the Loma Prieta earthquake in the marina. So one thing we wanted to do is look at tall buildings because they're new. It's sort of I wouldn't say that skyscrapers are new to San Francisco, but the neighborhoods that they're in are now becoming much more residential and less commercial than they have been in the past. So whereas it used to be commercial buildings where they were occupied 8 hours a day, a lot of you may recall, then downtown would be sort of a ghost town in the evening. You can find parking there. That has changed. Now we're seeing a lot more hotels in the area, but a lot of mixed-use buildings. And we're becoming aware of some of the issues that if you want to be earthquake safe, and you're downtown, you're going to face a different set of issues than you may face if you're out in the inner Sunset or in the Richmond district or somewhere else in the city. So we put together this project. It was really initiated in August of 2017. We released the recommendations a little bit more than a year later. The final report then came out in January of this year, and it was really under sort of the auspices of the Applied Technology Council, which is a nonprofit that provides they do a lot of work around seismic. They work a lot with FEMA and different organizations, and they bring together professionals, leaders in their field, along with academics. And it's sort of a unique nonprofit organization that pulls these folks together to address these types of issues. And I don't have a clicker, so next slide. Oh, here, one more. So, okay, can I hold the clicker? He doesn't want to give me up. He doesn't want to give up the control. It's like the remote control. So, motivation for the study. I think I covered some of these things. One of them is the unique challenges that high rises pose. I mean, now we're talking about buildings that, are close to 1,000 feet tall. So thinking about getting people out of the buildings, thinking about how much water you need to sort of immediately address some of the fires that may potentially occur in a building, thinking about the areas around the building, the cladding, and if those things fall down. Not to mention just the sheer number of folks that are living in them. The economic impacts that downtown has. Now, a lot of people think of downtown as a lot of the big businesses, but there's a huge service sector that's serving those businesses. There's a huge number of people that are coming in and out of downtown on a regular basis from all parts of San Francisco and quite frankly from all parts of the Bay Area for jobs and so forth. So we do think there's actually an equity component in the downtown plan as well. I mentioned the seismic safety program, and then I just wanted to, move on to talk about what these buildings look like in the city. So we studied about 156 of them that are over 240 feet tall. That was the focus. We did look at some smaller buildings as well, and this map shows where they are. Again, a lot of the downtown has been moving sort of from the north, where the Transamerica building is, more south. And part of that was on purpose, part of that was our planning codes, where we wanted the zoning changes, where we wanted to encourage high-rises, not in the sort of urban population, or not in the more traditional neighborhoods of North Beach and Chinatown in those areas, but move them more toward south of Market in those areas where we didn't have as much density. That also posed some challenges because we know that's where we have some of the liquefiable soil in the city, which meant that we had to be very conscientious around the engineering for those buildings, and that's one of the reasons that we're here today with talking about this study. So you can see the height of the buildings, the ones that are greater than 240 feet are the red ones in the middle there. You can see there are still a lot of the residential, which are the blue around it. The focus again was on the red, but we did look at some of the buildings in the 160 to 240 feet range as well. Go to the next slide. Then you can sort of see the building stock again. I think what's interesting here is this talks about the shift that we've seen. So the different colors, it may be hard for you to see up here, but the lighter, the sort of oranges colors, the lighter colors you're going to be more your hotels and residential, whereas the blue colors are the more traditional office and commercial buildings that we've seen. Again, we're seeing, if you look sort of down the bottom right corner, where you're really seeing a mix of them. The other thing I would just sort of mention in the table down to the right, you can see that the percentage of residential buildings, is around 33%. That's quite a bit higher, again, than what we saw before from a square footage percentage. So that's not the total number of buildings, but when you're thinking about the number of people and the square feet that they're occupying, and we're seeing that movement quite a bit. We're seeing that movement happen. Finally, we'll go to one more sort of picture that shows these occupancy levels again. And you can see the reddish buildings again. The blue are the more the commercial. The reddish buildings are sort of residential, some of the hotels that are located down there. 55% of the downtown area that we looked at is office, 23% residential, 24% mixed. Older buildings are mostly offices. We know we have some steel moment frame buildings there. Those are buildings that are of concern. We know after the Northridge earthquake there were some of these connections that failed. So there are those buildings that we call steel moment frame construction where we would like to get some more information on their vulnerabilities. There's, I think, there's not strong consensus as to whether those buildings were impacted by the Loma Prieta earthquake, but we know that as we move forward with the program, these are buildings to think about. And then the other buildings that we're really focusing on in this area would be concrete buildings, but they tend to be shorter than the 240 feet. But those are the sort of the bigger, more vulnerable buildings in downtown. If we go to this next map, it sort of shows you some of those things. And I'm gonna skip this because I'm gonna let the structural engineer talk about it, so I don't get myself in trouble. And we're gonna go to the downtown recovery plan. One of the big recommendations was to think about downtown, and this sort of scatter plot chart here shows where the tall buildings are. There are not, like we said, it's not the majority of the buildings there, but if you look at them, most of the tall buildings were built after 1980, we believe a lot of those buildings are going to perform perfectly well. But if you look at the ones sort of from the 1800, 1920, those eras, that's where we have our bigger concerns. And that's where we think we're going to see more damage, and in the areas where we would think about future programs around how to do seismic retrofits. The downtown recovery plan, I should just say, is something that we're just beginning, where we actually recently had an RFP for a contractor to come in and help us sort of scope this project out. It's something we're working a lot with BOMA, Building Owners and Managers Associations, and a number of other organizations, the Structural Engineers Association of Northern California and other folks, to sort of get a handle on how do we define downtown and how do we think about a recovery plan for this sort of unique part of the city. So with that, I will pass it to Gary. Do you want to hold the clicker, Gary? Yep.
Richard Tam, supervisor. Richard Tam, the supervisor of the top building plan review. We will be talking about the next two slides, and that's about the foundation and the structural system for the top building.
Yes. Okay. So the structural system for the tall buildings, we can say group into three main categories. So the first one will be the steel movement frame systems. So we can divide it into two different types. So some of the tall buildings is built with the steel movement frames at the perimeter of the building. So some are maybe more located in the interior space of the buildings. The second category will be the reinforced concrete shear wall systems. We can divide those buildings into about 4 different types. So one will be the reinforced concrete shear wall systems only. So the second type could be is a dual system that consists of reinforced concrete shear walls and also the reinforced concrete movement frames. The third type would be is a dual system that consists of reinforced concrete shear walls and also the reinforced the third type would be the dual system that consists of the reinforced concrete shear walls and the steel movement frame systems. And the fourth one will be a dual system with concrete shear wall and also a steel base frame systems. So the third category we can classify it will be with the steel base frame systems. So we do have 4 different types of system. They are the dual system, the steel movement frame with steel eccentric base frames. The other type would be as a dual system of steel movement frame together with the steel concentric base frames. The third one would be the dual system steel movement frames and the steel buckling restricted base frames. And the fourth one is a dual system that consists of a steel movement frame and also steel concentric and eccentrical base frames. So those are all different types of categories of the building structures, building system for the tall buildings. And most of the newer buildings located will be in the south of Market, and they are all built with concrete shear walls nowadays. And all older buildings are more built with the steel movement frames. Now, I turn to the next slide to talk about the building foundation systems for the tall buildings. So this slide you can see how the distributions of the foundations of tall buildings in our downtown area in the south of Markets. Over half of the tall buildings are built with pile foundations, and about a quarter of the tall buildings on the shallow mat foundations. So all the other types would be the foundations that have shallow footings, maybe a pile support mat, or maybe supported on drilled shafts. The drilled shaft foundations categories were introduced to San Francisco recently. So They are being used in some of the tall buildings that constructed with in the site with a depth of 200 feet down to the bedrock. So this is a new technologies that have been introduced to the San Francisco tall buildings recently. So as you see, much of the San Francisco downtown is built on the soil, is a soil field placed between in the late 1800s to the mid of 1900s. The soil type and foundation system can be influenced the seismic retrofit of the tall buildings, the seismic one of tall buildings. So some factors that can influence in choosing the type of the foundation system for the tall buildings, that will be including the soil types, the stiffness, and also that will be including the marine deposit, comer sands, or the old bay clay. The other factor would be the depth to the rock, and the building height and weight, the number of basement that the top building will have, the slope of the soil surface, or the proximity to the shoreline, the proximity adjacent to the underlying structures, and also the groundwater levels. That will determine the type of the foundation system that will be used for tall buildings. Some other points we need to consider is the construction technologies, logistics, and the economics when choosing this type of foundations. Okay, so I will pass the floor to our plan review service manager, Gary Ho, and continues to talk about the 16 recommendations from the Applied Technology Council for the tall building studies, and also the major directives.
Can you? As you can see, we're putting the recommendation and the mayor's executive director side by side. Now, so the recommendation as the base for our directive. Now let's talk about the recommendation first. We have 16 recommendations. We could group that in 4 major groups. The first group is that how are we going to take action to reduce the seismic risk prior to earthquake for the new building. The next group will be how we going to take, what step we will take, what action we will take to reduce the seismic risk for existing building. The next slide that we show the third category, that's the action we will take to reduce the seismic risk after the earthquake. Then fourth category will be the action to improve the city understanding of its tall building seismic risk. Now, the mayor's executive directive mainly is to increase the seismic resilience of the tall building and make us ready to prepare for the next big earthquake. Now, the directive, we could break it down to 6 major items. The first one is that we need to conduct the outreach program similar to this one, and we have done this few of them, and I can see we have more to. Now, the second item is that we need to add more regulation for the geotechnical issue. The third item is explore adopting higher seismic design standard. Now, our DBI have already 3 pieces of document addressing these issues. Now, we issued the first piece of document called Ministry Bulletin last year. Now, in that, we emphasize any tall building, if they locate in the seismic liquefaction zone, and if the foundation not go all the way down to the bedrock, we need to have 2 outside expert geotechnical consultants to look at that, in addition to the project geotechnical engineer. We want to make sure that the building won't have excess settlement and tilting. Now, and another piece of document that we issued last year is about that we require the project sponsor, after they finish the building, they need to have 10-year continuous monitoring of this actual settlement. and we want them to submit annual report. We want to make sure that the settlement, the estimated settlement, the actual settlement is still within the estimated settlement that come from the original SOIL report. Now, and we issue another piece of document last week, and that we talk about the preliminary guideline of how we're going to review SOIL report, in which we talk about the geotechnical investigation criteria, this testing, soil testing method, and the footing type that need to be suitable for that particular site. Now, we also emphasize that when we do the excavation and the shoring for that building, we want to make sure that we won't have adverse effect to the adjacent building. We don't want to see the adjacent building have some sort of movement due to our excavation and shoring. Now, we have been continuously working with a group of geotechnical experts with our community. We want to finish up, we will continue working with them. And we're also going to work with Simon, the structural engineer of Northern California, to finalize those guidelines. Right? And regarding that, exploring higher seismic design standard, we are working with Sion to develop the standards for performance-based design. We are thinking about, we're considering to have less drift allowable to the building, which means that during the earthquake, we want the building to have less movement. And we also are considering that adding some more requirement for the seismic design for the essential mechanical system, electrical system, the pumping system, and also the elevator for the building. Why is that so? Because we want to make sure that we have quicker recovery time so that the people can go back to the building and do their regular functions. Now, the next slide. The next slide that is about the task for the directive. That is the update the so-called SAP program. That's a State Safety Assessment Program. We want to revise it so it's for the top building. And we also want to develop to clarify each department's role and responsibility after the big one here. The fifth task force is that we're going to establish a disaster recovery task force, and we are going to develop a recovery plan for the financial district area. We know that the financial district area, we have most of the tall building in that area. I would estimate we got maybe about 75% of the tall buildings they are located in the financial area. The last one that we need to provide information and share knowledge with other jurisdiction regarding the tall building safety. We will be working with ORCP and all other departments that we need to work with. That, for example, the Department of Emergency Management, DPW, maybe, and Fire and Health Department. Now, and we will be continue looking at all the other recommendations. In fact, Brian just mentioned, we are starting to develop a program to retrofit the tall concrete, not the tall concrete building and the tall steel buildings. All right, so I guess that pretty much finishes up our review. And the next slide, look at the next slide. We have our email address for Brian.
All right, well, it's on the back of the presentation.
Yeah, that we have on the slide.
Oh, no, there it is.
Oh, now, here we are. We have the email address of Brian, myself and Richard. If you have any question after the presentation, you can always send the question to us. And we will be more happy to do our best to answer the question. And we also have the booth setting up out there for the top building. We have a copy of the summary of our recommendation. We have copies of our DBI document that I just mentioned about. And I think we still have some time and we could take some questions.
Questions, Gary?
Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank you for covering a very complicated concept, but a very important topic for the city of San Francisco, since we all know this is earthquake land, and this is very important. Brian, Gary, and Richard have an enormous reserve of knowledge, can be very helpful. But I must ask you, Ryan, because I would bet you that there are several people in the audience who never heard of the Office of Resilience. And even though you introduced yourself, could you give us a more global explanation as to what you guys do?
Sure, happy to. Yeah, so we are Office of Resilience and Capital Planning. We look at resilience issues, and I would sort of say they fall into two categories. There's seismic resilience and climate resilience. Those are the two primary areas that we're focusing on. We help develop policy and recommendations for the mayor and the board of supervisors. We also chair the city's capital planning committee, which produces a 10-year capital plan. We have a $39 billion 10-year capital plan that was recently passed, and that sort of dictates how infrastructure funds will be spent on publicly owned assets and public infrastructure. For the private side, of course, we can't control how the private sector spends its dollars, but we have our earthquake safety implementation program, and that actually focuses on a lot of different areas. That's where the tall building study came from. It looks at soft story buildings. It looks at there's a facade ordinance that's coming into play shortly. There are other programs that we're also working on in that area. Finally, we also have a connection to sort of community resilience. We have we have what's called Resilient SF, which is our city's resilient plan, and part of that is sort of how are we working with the community. So there's a neighborhood empowerment network, and there are resilient, what we call them, resilient hubs through the city. I think there are 8 or 9 of them right now. We're moving up to 12 of them, and that's again our Empowered Communities program that works really on individual communities and how they can become resilient. So all of that's on our website, and again, happy to answer questions if you have any more about that. Yes.
Excellent, I appreciate it. By the way, I'm not the only person asking questions. You're invited to go and ask questions. Just queue up here so you can talk to the microphone so everyone can hear you. The next question I have is for Gary and Richard. You mentioned that you guys are continuing to work on information sheets for the public. Can you give us some insight as to how these information sheets will affect how you do your job on a day-to-day basis? You're dealing with some really important issues. Gary?
Okay, so at our DBI, with the assistance of the group of geotechnical consultant experts, we do develop our information sheet and the emission bulletins for our department to use. And this group of consultant experts, they are all familiar with the soil types and the soil profile in our city. So this administration bulletins is to provide the guidelines to assist DBI in reviewing the settlement and the defensive settlement of the buildings, and make sure the quality assurance and quality control for the foundation system is being addressed. And most focus will be on the shoring and dewatering design, and also the testing methods of the pile installation programs. So DBI we do have our own in-house geotechnical engineer. So together with the engineering design review team of the tall buildings, so we will review the geotechnical investigation report, and then we will make sure that it is complete and also appropriate for the projects. So we want to make sure that the shoring and the dewatering system, when doing the construction, could be closely monitored so that it could reduce the settlement of the adjacent building in case it happens.
Thanks, Richard. Really appreciate that. Sir?
Thank you. My name's John Brodovich. I was a contractor in San Francisco for some time. Gary was one of my engineering plan checkers for a while. And now I just advise people on their projects in San Francisco. And I want to ask about the steel frame retrofitting on the 240 foot and above buildings, because you adopted a good financing program for homeowners to do that in the soft story program. And I'm wondering if there's anything in the works to facilitate financing to owners of buildings of that size, because that is really going to be a complex retrofit and very expensive for those taller buildings.
Yeah, I think I almost always get the financing questions come to me. Yeah, very good question and really challenging. I think part of what we're thinking about putting together a program is making sure that you have enough lead time so that people can get prepared for it, and hopefully building owners can maybe work some of these retrofits into other things that they may be doing with the building, where they may be moving tenants out or making sort of significant improvements or that already would have to be made, so you can sort of do it at the same time. The program that we built for the soft story, the financing program, allows you to attach financing to the building. It is only for residential right now. It's sort of managed through the state of California. It's called PACE, and I think what we will need to do is to be creative in how we sort of can assist with these building owners. We did have a program where we passed a general obligation bond to work with the unreinforced masonry building ordinance that was passed in the late 1990s, and there are still, especially nonprofit organizations and so forth, that are using that funding. The interesting thing is when we came up with that funding solution, the private sector, which had been sort of reluctant to provide lower cost loans for retrofits, stepped in. They sort of saw us as a competitor. They stepped in and offered some lower interest rate loans, which we think was part of the reason that that program was so successful. When you're talking about the scale for these 240 foot plus buildings, it's going to have to be something pretty significant to work with the owners. So, we've done a number of different working groups, and I think as we develop this program, that's going to be one of the biggest questions we have to answer. And I'd be happy to get any of your feedback or ideas that you may want to share.
Yeah, no, I'll be in touch. I get these questions preempted anytime I get into a conversation with a building owner, whether it's residential or commercial. That's usually the first question. How do they expect me to pay for this? Right. So, thank you.
So I was just wanting to get a little bit of clarification on your recommendations, and I noticed on the table you have short-term, mid-term, long-term. Are you at a point where you can clarify on what years you plan on enforcing those recommendations?
I do not have all of the information in front of me, but yeah, I think the short term are really projects that we think we can do in 6 to 12 months. That's what we're looking at for a lot of the short-term ones. Now, part of that will depend on, our ability to get funds to do this work, the availability of consultants if we need consultants, and I have to say, as well as volunteer support. The Structural Engineers Association of Northern California has been a great partner of ours, but they're also all on working on a volunteer basis. Mm-hmm. So it's how do we work through them, and if we can't use them, then does the city have the resources to sort of let out a contract, and can we find the right people to do that? So there are still some questions, but generally I think short term is 6 to, I want to say 12, maybe 15 months in that range. Midterm, I wanted to say is closer to 2 years, 2 to like 3 or 4 years, and then long term is probably going to be more in the 3 to 5 years range.
Maybe I want to add to it. No, this so-called short-term, mid-term, or long-term is a recommendation from the ATC report, and we are looking that in more detail, see when maybe we need to adjust it. Some of them maybe take longer. Say retrofitting the 20 or the tall steel frame movement frame, which is a tall order, it's going to take time, right? So it's going to take more than a couple of years. right?
So the final report will have a little bit more clarification.
So we're working on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the report's final, and there are definitely some ambitious goals in the report. These 16 recommendations about how quickly we can do them. I think now it's on the city, and we're doing a summit next week on the tall buildings report. We're putting together some of those working groups that we're going to need to have to I think get to some of the detail that you're asking for, which is okay. We got it from the experts. Now it's all right. We're coming back. The mayor actually issued an executive directive right at the same time. A lot of the deadlines in that executive directive were 12 months. So our first step, I think, is to get sort of through some of those. Those key recommendations that the mayor wants us to follow up on, and then it'll be, I think, getting to some of these other programs that are in the remaining, I don't know how many there are, 12 or so that the mayor doesn't cover.
All right, thank you.
My question is kind of a follow-up on that one, on the timing on this. Gary, at the end of your presentation, you tossed out that retrofitting of tall buildings is part of this plan, of existing tall buildings is part of the plan at some point. So one, I'd kind of like a sense of, obviously that's going to be in the long, of the small, short, and medium, small, medium, or long term, that's long term. Here we are, we're like 20 years since Loma Prieta. What?
30 years.
It's okay, so 30, and you've gotten through two of the ordinances. I know you got through the soft story, and you got through the masonry. So, as a resident in a tall building that was built in the 60s, what can we expect when the ordinances are going to get to this? Do you have any sense of that? I'm sure this is just guesswork, but I'd like to get a sense of it.
You want to say? I see Director Huey over there looking at me too. I'm nervous what I'm going to say, but I think we really want to put together a program. We know LA has a program to address these buildings. It's in place. It's over 25 years. I think we have a stronger history than they do of sort of trying to be very methodical about how we do this, and about trying to make sure we have a reasonable program, and that we're not overburdening building owners so that they're able to participate, or staff that have to review this information, or contractors and structural engineers, and those people that we need to have on the ground to help do the work. So my sense is that we will be announcing something, I would hope in the next 12 months, as far as the outline of a program. And then I expect in the next 2 years, we will have, our CAPS report wanted us to have a program together by 2020. So we're probably a little behind what the CAPS report had recommended, but we feel like we can't wait much longer. We want to get this information out there. And I think the idea is also to provide certainty for building owners like yourself and other folks, so that it isn't something that's sort of sitting out there. Should I do it? Should I not do it? So I think part of it would be us to sort of start to lay out, the way we did with the Soft Story program, where we had different tiers. We had 4 different tiers to sort of lay out that type of structure. If you're in this type of building, this type of height, this type of occupancy, then you can expect, it may be 3 or 4 years we're gonna have to do an evaluation form, you're gonna have to do a permit, submittal, and then you have to do the construction. And we see those as sort of 3 distinct steps. And I think we're gonna have to build in enough time for your property owners to get through each of those steps. So
Presumably, you were saying the LA does have an ordinance in place now, correct?
Yep, yeah,
So-
Santa Monica too, yeah.
So we're probably going to be following along that, and those are basically 20-year time frames to address these issues.
Right.
So we're talking decades, right?
Yeah, and it may depend on the type of building, right? The type of building and the risks that that building poses. And the ability the ability to get, how complex is the building. In the Soft Story program, we put the complex buildings at the end of the program, because we wanted to make sure, and that's why we've got 56% of the people did their work before the ordinance was even in place, because then they knew about it. So, yeah.
Good morning. Are any of you aware of any tall buildings that have been built in San Francisco or that are planned to be built that are designed to meet more than life safety standards and designed to be usable after an earthquake? And is there anything in the future where you're going to be changing the building code to make builders build buildings that not only survive but are usable after earthquakes?
Yes. Want me to jump in here first? I mean, I'll say yes for sure. 181 Fremont is a building in the city that has advertised quite a bit about its ability to be fully functional after a major earthquake. I believe there's some other buildings as well in the city that Richard or Gary can mention. As far as performance goes, you know, we have been talking about enhanced performance for buildings for quite some time in San Francisco. The state is actually taking it up. There's a bill that I think is going to be at the Senate Housing Committee in the next week or so that will be emphasizing higher performance. It's not as strong a bill as we would actually like. It's putting together a committee of people to make a determination as to whether or not higher performance is merited. We think it is, and again, this comes from the city and county of San Francisco, Spur, other organizations that have been talking about when you have vulnerable populations, we have to make sure that buildings don't just survive the earthquake, but can be functional and used after the earthquake. So, any other buildings besides 181 Fremont?
Those buildings that was built after 2000, they are using the performance-based design. I mean, they are all very good buildings to stand at the higher earthquake levels. So recently built buildings, we do have 500 Folsom, but they are all under construction.
Yeah. There's also a senior building at Shotwell Street too that just went up that is a higher than code.
I want to emphasize that for all those buildings over 240 feet, we actually have so-called outside expert review on that. We want to make sure that at least that comply with the building code requirement. The thing that you mentioned, are we going to make that more restrictive? I think just in my presentation, we are considering that we are going to develop a standard for performance-based design. We just talk about that we might allow less movement of the building when subject to earthquake. We also want to add more seismic safety requirement for the just like what I said, the pumping system, the electrical system, the mechanical system, and the elevator. Because the elevator is an important element of the top building. So because we want to keep it running. So I actually can check that the 181 Fremont. That building absolutely have as they advertise that more than the building code requirement. They emphasize that they could be tougher and we use that building quicker than other buildings.
Last question. Thank you.
Hi, this may be a question that you guys here to answer, but as a lifelong Californian who grew up primarily in the suburbs, we as kids learned what we were supposed to do in the earthquake. Now I live in a high rise, and now I walk through downtown and so forth. So, on a very practical, personal level, I don't know how the buildings are constructed when I go into a building. So if I'm walking down the sidewalk in the glass buildings, I'd like to know what to do. If I'm in the lobby of a building, I'd like to know what to do. And if I'm in a residence in one of the high floors, I'd like to know what to do. So where are those very basic personal safety questions? Where should they be asked?
Yeah, well, I would just say for one thing, duck, cover, and hold is still what you want to do in any situation when you feel we're in a situation. The city has actually talked a lot about early earthquake warning systems and so forth, but because of San Francisco's proximity to the faults, we're not going to have as much time as Mexico City or some of these places or even parts of LA where it'll take some time for the effects of the earthquake to be felt. for tall, we do not have specific information for tall buildings, and I think that's part of what we want to push for in this downtown recovery plan, because we recognize it is going to be different, than in other situations. We have I mentioned before, the Empowered Communities program, where we're working with block champions. We started to build out a program where you would have floor champions or something similar for tall buildings. Part of it is going to be, I think, us working with residents like yourself and people who are concerned about this, and working with the building owners. We've also started to have some discussions with the hotels. Finally, I would mention there's also a facade ordinance, so I do think I do think we're going to be able to have places, or there's going to be a reasonable amount of confidence that you can walk outside and that you don't have to worry about stuff, flying out of buildings. But those are all really good questions. I think that we need to.
There should
That
be
was
some
something to
real,
take on.
it's going to be panic.
Yeah.
And so there should be some real basic guidelines. Do I pin myself against the building? Do I walk out in the middle of the road? I mean, some really, really basic stuff I think would help mitigate panic.
No. That's good suggestions.
Excellent. Well, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you very much for a very informative panel and an excellent topic. And guess what? DBI has a raffle.
Okay, so we're going to pull out 10 raffle tickets that you received when you registered for the workshop. Last 3 digits, 405, 405.
最後嘅號碼係405。
The next number, 389, 389.
下一個號碼係389。
Next number, 413, 413.
下一個號碼係413。
Next number, 411, 411.
下一個號碼係411。
Next number, 397, 397. Next number, 400, 400.
下一個號碼係400。
Next number, 414, 414.
下一個號碼係414。
Next number, 407, 407.
下一個號碼係407。
409, 409.
409。
And the last number, 406, 406.
最後一個406。
Thanks again for your attendance. The next workshop will start in 15 minutes. Also want to let you know that we have 2 other excellent booths. There's Ask Me Anything, and also there's a CPR emergency presentation being done each hour at the top of the hour. Have a good day.